One sure sign that the Trump administration won the MS-13 gang member Maryland man argument in the news is that everyone wanted to forget it this morning. They saw that Chris Van Hollen was a disaster. They saw that they had lost the narrative. So suddenly, today's headlines are all about Pete Hegseth. Time to turn the page, time to change the subject. Oh, we don't need to talk about that anymore because we lost. So let's just move on to the next fake outrage. Well, here's your New York Times headline. Hegseth said to have shared attack details in second signal chat. Defense Secretary sent sensitive information about strikes in Yemen to an encrypted group chat. They included his wife and brother. People familiar with the matter said. Here's what's interesting about that. The people familiar with the matter. Did you see the headlines last week where a good handful of people got fired from the Pentagon because they were leaking information to the media? Put two and two together, dudes. These guys are angry that they got fired. They got fired for leaking to the media. And suddenly the New York Times has a big article with inside information. And then here's Politico. Former Pentagon official warns department's dysfunction could topple Hegseth. Now, this sounds like this Politico reporter snagged an interview with a former Pentagon official. But if you read the subheadline, this tells you everything you need to know about how the media operates and how Politico in particular works. The last month has been a full-blown meltdown at the Pentagon. Jin Oyat, the former top Defense Department spokesperson, wrote in a Politico magazine opinion piece. Now, think about this for a minute. That former top Defense Department spokesperson. In other words, he's not at the Defense Department anymore. He didn't get the gig that he wanted at the Pentagon. So now he's gone. He writes an opinion piece for Politico magazine. And now Politico newspaper writes an article about the opinion piece in their magazine as if it's news. But this news article is really just regurgitating the opinion piece from, yet again, a disgruntled former employee. It's amazing how this works, isn't it? I mean, as soon as you see it once, you can't unsee it. Sean Parnell, who is the spokesperson for the Pentagon, the job the guy from Politico wanted, put this statement out. Another day, another old story back from the dead. The Trump-hating media continues to be obsessed with destroying anyone committed to President Trump's agenda. This time, New York Times and all other fake news that repeat their garbage are enthusiastically taking the grievances of disgruntled former employees as the sole sources for their article. They relied only on the words of people who were fired this week and appear to have a motive to sabotage the Secretary of the President's agenda. There was no classified information in any signal chat, no matter how many ways they try to write the story. What is true is that the Office of the Secretary of Defense is continuing to become stronger and more efficient in executing President Trump's agenda. We've already achieved so much for the American warfighter and will never back down. So that's Sean Parnell. He's the spokesperson for the Defense Department. Once again, look at the headline on the opinion piece in Politico magazine. Last month has been a full-blown meltdown at the Pentagon. John Oyat, the former top Defense Department spokesperson, wrote. Now think about that for a minute. This guy used to be the top Defense Department spokesperson. Now that job belongs to this guy, Sean Parnell. Do you think maybe he has an axe to grind? Do you think maybe he's annoyed? Do you think maybe when you get fired from an organization or you don't get the promotion you were hoping to get from an organization, one of your sadly base instincts, but still rather understandable based on the human condition and narcissism and pride and egotistical impulses, is to sort of do the sour grapes thing? I want this job at the Pentagon. I want this job at the Pentagon. Somebody else got the job at the Pentagon. The Pentagon sucks. I don't know this guy, but it is telling that his opinion piece got published in Politico, isn't it? So what to make of this? Well, first of all, I can tell you that every single one of the journalists writing this story, they have the Signal app on their phone, and they use it to talk to their anonymous sources in the government. I promise you that. I can also tell you that government officials in sensitive jobs in the Defense Department and the intelligence community, the FBI and the Justice Department get their government-issued devices with Signal already preloaded, and they're advised to use Signal. That's just the truth. It's the fact. I know it firsthand because I know people who work in the government, and they've showed me. I communicate with them myself on Signal. And everybody knows that in Washington, D.C. This is a non-scandal. Are there people at the Pentagon who don't like Pete Hegseth? Absolutely. Are there people who are big MAGA guys who love Trump and don't like Pete Hegseth? Absolutely. Some of them because they're jealous of Pete Hegseth. Some of them because they don't think Pete Hegseth is doing a good job. Some of them because Pete Hegseth is doing a little too good a job. It's Washington, D.C. Resentment comes from all corners. But the fact that this was the dominant story other than the death of the Pope this morning tells you that they've lost all the other narratives they had going into the weekend. Everything crashed and burned, so it was time to bring up a new one. So the question is it chaos over at the Pentagon? Well, yes, there may be some chaos at the Pentagon right now. That's what happens when you bring in a brand new team that's supposed to stop the direction this giant organization was going and turn it in a new direction. All the people who lost their jobs because they worked for the DEI department over at the Pentagon, yeah, it's probably pretty chaotic over there for them. All the people who were ignoring the warfighters and were more interested in politics and funding and money and machinations and intrigue and playing the Washington, D.C. game, instead of putting our soldiers and our sailors and our airmen and our Marines first and foremost in their minds, yeah, for them, it's very chaotic right now. That's what we voted for. Listen, under Lloyd Austin, it wasn't chaotic at all, right? I mean, just look at how neat and orderly the Afghanistan pullout was. It wasn't chaotic under Lloyd Austin at all. Just ask the thousands of people who were dishonorably discharged because they wouldn't put an experimental shot in their arm. But at least it wasn't chaotic. It wasn't chaotic at all under Lloyd Austin when he went MIA for a week without reporting up to the commander-in-chief or down to his deputy secretary. But you didn't have any headlines in the New York Times about the chaos over at the Pentagon during those halcyon days of Lloyd Austin's reign of terror. The fact of the matter is, it appears Pete Hegseth is doing exactly the job that Donald Trump wanted. And by the way, part of the proof in the pudding is that there's Pete Hegseth front and center this morning at the Easter egg roll. And when asked about all of these stories, well, when I just said that he's doing exactly the job Donald Trump wants him to do, part of that job is to do this.
What do you want to say, sir, about the Signal chat controversy?
You know, what a big surprise that a few leakers get fired and suddenly a bunch of hit pieces come out from the same media that peddled the Russia hoax. Won't get back their Pulitzers. They got Pulitzers for a bunch of lies. Pulitzers for a bunch of lies and on hoaxes, time and time and time again. And as they peddle those lies, no one ever calls them on it. See, this is what the media does. They take anonymous sources from disgruntled former employees, and then they try to slash and burn people and ruin their reputations. Not going to work with me, because we're changing the Defense Department, putting the Pentagon back in the hands of warfighters, and anonymous smears from disgruntled former employees on old news doesn't matter. So I'm happy to be here at the Easter egg roll with my dad and my kids, because, you know, this is what we're doing it for. These kids right here. This is why we're fighting the fake news media. This is why we're fighting slash and burn Democrats. This is why we're fighting hoaxsters. This group, this group right here, full of hoaxsters that peddle anonymous sources from leakers with axes to grind, and then you put it all together as if it's some news story. And when we know it, you know exactly what it is. So I'm really proud of what we're doing for the president, fighting hard across the board, and I'm going to go roll some Easter eggs with my kids. Thank you very much.
Have you spoken to the president?
Have spoken to the president, and we are going to continue fighting on the same page all the way.
All right. And just to confirm that, in fact, he has gotten a vote of confidence from the president, through his spokesperson, gave a vote of confidence that was unambiguously supportive. Trust me, if you watch Washington, D.C. enough, especially the Trump presidency the first time around, you very rarely heard this kind of endorsement, especially for a politician that potentially could be under fire from the media. Watch this.
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the warfighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring. So they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
That is beyond unambiguous. That is 100% in his camp. Now, things could change. They always can in Washington, D.C., and certainly in a Trump presidency, they can change quickly depending on what's going on. But as of now, Pete Hegseth has the full support of the president. And let me just say this, because listen, a lot of people have stuff to say about Pete Hegseth. And no, he's not your typical Secretary of Defense. We've seen the typical Secretary of Defense over the course of the last several years. The knives are out for him because there's a lot of money being made in Washington, D.C. through the Defense Department right now. And he kind of threatens that. Pete Hegseth, if I can put it in terms of sports, for those of you who appreciate sports, Pete Hegseth is a player's coach. All right. The players love him. And if you're into college sports, Pete Hegseth is out there meeting the star players in their living room with their mom and assuring them that if they come and play on this team, they're going to win a natty. And he's recruiting them. He's recruiting them and breaking records recruiting star players. The warfighters love this head coach. Now, that also means, if you understand sports, that sometimes the player's coach doesn't always play well with the other people on the coaching staff or coaches of rival teams. Doesn't always play well with the executives as well. But the players love him. And oftentimes, when the players love the coach, well, they'll go to the wall for him. They'll do whatever it takes. They're going to leave everything out on the field to win the game. And in this case, the game is winning a battle and a war on behalf of the United States of America. I know we're not used to this kind of Secretary of Defense, but maybe it's time we tried it out, because that other thing ain't working anymore. And at this point, with real dangers all around the world, maybe we need a player's coach. Maybe the players deserve to have a player's coach. So when push comes to shove and they're literally taking bullets, they know that the top guy has their back.